This video here will be starting out. This here will be for the 1982 racing season. So the picture there on the left is my 1982 YZ125, and the one there on the right with the 109 is my 1981 YZ125, which this year I'm going to run two different bikes. The 82 is going to be for, they started the stock and modified class, so my 82 is going to be a modified. My 81 is going to be for the stock class. Just decided to keep my leftover bike from the year prior to and run it as a stock class. So got two bikes. This year it finished off 81, starting to have some pretty consistent finishes in the A class. Not really wins in that, but more like third to sixth, staying in that range pretty consistently. So my plans are 82 is going to be, in my mind, this year is going to be like my breakout year. The year that now I'm going to start to being a top contender in the A class. So I take my, you get the new bikes in November, around Thanksgiving every year the new bikes come out. So I get my new 125. And before I ever even start that bike, it's never even been started, brand new bike right from the showroom. And you pull the motor and send that off to a company called RPM. They were pretty well known for building some really fast race engines. So RPM is going to build the motor this year. And Keystone Suspension, which was George Quay, later becomes Pro Action. Keystone is doing the suspension, complete suspension. I mean, we're doing everything to this bike. The rear shocks, the forks, along with a lot of other modifications, not just the motor, the chassis modifications we're doing. Anything I can possibly think of to this bike we're doing. So RPM is, they put in, it's called a turbo crank. They did a turbo crank where they weight the crank, add additional weight into it. They do the porting, they do everything with the cylinder. We put a pipe on it, performance pipe, and they go through the complete transmission. And at that time what they were doing is taking all your gears, shift forks, shift shafts, all that. It's all getting Teflon coated. It just makes them a lot more, it's to add and make them more slippery so things slide, move easier, less resistant, things like that. I mean, we're doing everything, motor, transmission, the whole bit. So anyway, they build that motor, and again, my plans are now that this is going to be my breakout year. Now I got a bike that's built, fully modified, a legitimate race engine, the whole bit in it. In the past I had Kraus Racing do some of the other porting and that on some of the earlier bikes. But anyway, big dreams for this racing season. Start to work out some in that, or at least what I knew as far as a workout program was nothing like what you probably should have been doing, but I didn't know any better. Young at that age, just didn't know any better. So another big change this year. Around the same time I get my new bike, this is in November, I meet a girl. Shirley Reinhardt. Both of us had went to Commodore Perry. I had already graduated now by 82. I graduated in 80. She was still in high school. I was at this time, I believe I was 19 years old, and she was probably actually 14, just turning 15. There's 4 years between us. So anyway, meet her one night. This is in November, and so that brings about some big changes in my life and for the remainder of my life after that. We end up getting married later on. So that is Shirley in both pictures there. That would have been in the very beginnings of 82. So on to the racing part. So the beginning of that year now, hit the first race, and I don't know where we started out at. In my journal, I have nothing for the beginning parts of that year, but I do got a fair amount later on in the year. So the very first race is like, typically we would start in February, probably at the indoor arena there at Harrisburg, because we weren't doing Florida that year, so that probably would have been the first one for the year. Going to there and then transition, usually the outdoor racing, and that starts early March. Sometimes there's snow still on the ground at the very beginning races. So not sure exactly when we started that year, but and at that point Shirley was pretty young, so she wasn't able to go along just yet. We had just met and everything. So going to the races, I'm running 125A class, and the motor is blowing up. I mean, it blows up on me. So big disappointment. And the crank, took the crank bearings, the rod bearing right out of the crank as well. So I have to rebuild the motor, which to that point you got to split cases, split the actual crank apart, put in new rod bearings, new rod, the whole bit, put a whole rod kit in it, put it back together, rebuild it. Next race, same thing. Blow it up again, put the rod bearings out of it. And so rebuild that whole engine again, go to the third race of the year. Same thing again, motor blows up. So this continues on. Fourth race of the year, blow up the motor. Fifth race of the year, blow up the motor. And every time, this is getting very frustrating now. I just put so much time, money, and effort into this, and the motor keeps failing. And just trying to fix this picture that keeps falling over here on me. So anyway, it's very discouraging. The motor keeps going out. So after 6 weeks of this straight in a row, and after putting in so much time and effort, and I had met Shirley, so interests are starting to change here a little bit, that I say, that's it. I'm quitting. I'm done. Between meeting her and all the work and effort that went into this, I make the decision, I'm done. So not knowing this is what I'd call the end of my dream of making it as a pro rider and eventually landing a factory ride. And I'd have to say about every guy that makes it into the A ranks and that in races, that is their ultimate goal, is to land a factory ride. And that was mine the whole time, working towards that goal and that. And really it had become somewhat like a job to me a little bit, where some of the fun had went away because it become very serious at that point in time, where you had to ride, you had to practice, you had to ride, it was a lot of work went into it, and it was all the time. So anyway, I decide that's it, I'm done, I'm quitting. So I do, I pull out and park the bike. So that's going to be the end. And so I go on, and I still have the race shop out behind my parents, the garage and that, and a lot of my friends still come around. There's Bob Swartzmiller and Donnie Snyder and Wayne Carastory. Just a lot of kids from the campground come down and hung out. We're in the bike shop there all the time. You know, that was the big thing. I'd always be working on the bike, getting them ready for the races. Had the practice track right there to ride. Right there, pull out the back door of the garage, cross the yard, and you had the practice track there. So it was really a big hangout for a lot of the kids in that. But now I'm done racing. And some of them were old enough, they were starting to go along here and there with us to the races and that. So some time passes, and they're bugging me all the time. Hey, why don't you go back racing and that? And so finally, it was about July now, somewhere into July, because I'm seeing the race results here now and that I recorded. So in July, only been off then for several months, I decided, all right, I'll go racing again. They're bugging me wanting to go. I'll go racing again, but I'm just going to do this for fun. I'm going back. I'm dropping out of the A ranks. I'm going to go back and run the amateur into the B class. Run that there. We'll just go now and then, have some fun doing it. So that's the plan. We're getting to go racing again, but it's just going to be for fun. But to do that, by now I had already got rid of my 81 125, so I'm down to just my 82. And that motor blows up constantly, so I decide, okay, we're going to take that, and I'm getting rid of that turbo crank in it because the rod kept going out. And ultimately it ended up what had happened when they weighted that crank in that and put that turbo crank in there. I just feel that it was just directing too much of the fuel flow to the outer parts, not letting any, because your lubrication on a 2-cycle comes out of the fuel, your oil fuel mixture, and I just felt that it's not getting the lubrication to that center bearing, your rod bearing, because it's directing all the fuel flow out and up the ports. So I bought a brand new stock crank, put it in that engine, and that actually solved the problem. No more problems with it. So I still had the rest of the race engine, just took that turbo crank out, and that ended the blowing up. Now it become much more reliable. And also a good friend of mine that year, John Gallagher, he was running minis before, and he had now got a 125, so he's racing a 125 too in there. And so come back, going to do this here for fun. So first race back is July 18th. We go to Rocky Ridge, which is down by Pittsburgh, McDonald, PA, I believe it is. And I'm signing up 125B modified class. And we go there that weekend, and so now I'm in the B class. I'm not in the A class no more. Had been off for several months, hadn't rode at all, but go back there, and you really don't lose a whole lot in that period of time, but you do lose some. So anyway, we show up there that weekend, and I told this story earlier, but I'll go back to it because it had to be on this date when this happened. We go there, and there's a guy, young guy, never met up with them before at the races, Mike Jones, and he is also running the same class, 125B modified. So Mike was pretty fast. So anyway, that day there, I take the overall win. I won first moto, won the second moto, took the overall. And I believe Mike more than likely had taken second place that day. So anyway, you go up to the sign-up building at the end of the day for their awards thing where they pass out trophies and that. And I take the first place trophy, and Mike's there. We don't know each other, but he just walks over and reaches out, shakes my hand, says, "Good ride, dude." And anyway, that was first meeting of Mike Jones. And just to give you a little rundown where Mike makes it to then, Mike is a B rider at that point in time. So he's younger than I am a little bit. Just leaving his B ranks, he's going to be moving up to the A ranks. Here, I believe it was the following year, probably in '83, when Mike actually moved up to the 125A class. And I kind of know that because the following year we'd done the Harrisburg Arena Cross. It was me and Johnny Gallagher and Mike Jones and Craig Martin all went out there, rode out at J&J Cycles. Johnny got his bikes there. That's why John let us use his trailer and stuff. Craig worked there, and Craig knew Mike and that. So anyway, the four of us end up together out there at Harrisburg and pit together and that. And I remember Mike just being kind of worried, you know, the beginning of the season starting out, and he's just going to the A class, and that would have been the first race of the year. So that was his transition up to the A class. But Mike goes on then in his career, has a very successful career where he was the 1988 and the 1999, took second overall in the 125 Supercross East Series. This here is the professional Supercross series. he ends up second overall. And later Mike gets into freestyle motocross, kind of starts doing that. One of the very originators of freestyle, where Mike was the very first gold medal winner at the Red Bull FMX freestyle competition, or it may have even been Mountain Dew was the promoter at that point in time, not sure, but I think it was Red Bull. But he was the very first gold medal winner at that, along with he won a number of other championship things and titles and that over his career. But that was first time ever meeting Mike Jones, and that was right there at Rocky Ridge. July 18th was there. So I'll give some of the race results then. So now I'm back in the B class. So we go on from Rocky Ridge there in July, but I don't race again then until August. Go back and pick up, or if I did, I didn't record the results. So I guess it was August 1st, so maybe it wasn't that long in between. So we go to Ohio International, and I take a second and first, take the first overall. Then August 8th, the following week, we go to Yankee Lake. I take a first and a first for a first overall. Then we go back to Rocky Ridge. I take a second and a first for a first overall. And then back to Yankee Lake, August 22nd. Take a first and a first, first overall. Then September, we're into September now, and we go to Ohio International. Then I take a first and a first with the first overall. So pretty much in that point in time, and primarily I'm going from the A back into the B class, and most of those races it was, unless somebody like Jones, or there was another kid I meet up here with later, which I'll mention here a little bit later, is I'm pretty much going to win the class. And usually the wins were by, I remember doing the one at Yankee Lake there where I'd crossed the finish line, rode back to the pits, was putting my bike on the stand before second place. Second place was just crossing the finish line. So most of the wins were just pretty big wins. And it really took it for granted at that time, you know, that that had come pretty easy. And it wasn't until some years later I go back and gonna try that again to realize that even the B class wins were pretty good, really. But I just really took it for granted back then. So anyway, and I don't know that that was all of the performances here, because I also see in 1982 I'd run the they run a District 5 Pennsylvania State Championship Series. This here's just a state championship. This isn't like say Loretta Lynn's, which is basically a national thing, but this here is just the Pennsylvania State Championship. And we run that series as well, or maybe some of these races were part of the series. I don't recall. But in that series, I remember me, Butch, and Clay used to go up, and others at times, we would go up trail riding to Du Bois. Or there was a cabin up there. We'd go up there on weekends and pretty much ride a lot, ride and party. It was just a weekend at the mountains with the bikes and that, trail riding and partying. Anyway, they were going up there one of the weekends, and this here it happened that one of the championship races fell on that weekend. And I thought, well, I got a big enough lead in points that I could, like an idiot, not even thinking of it, okay, I'm going trail riding. So I do, and skip that one. So somewhere in there at one of the championship races, I'm not sure where it was at, out center part of the state or whatever, we did the race, but their clubhouse or something where the results were stored, they had a fire. Before the results ever got turned in and recorded, the clubhouse burnt. So they lost all the results from that weekend. So now that took my results from there out. So that, with missing the weekend, really closed it up, where I thought I had just lost this championship. So the final race was at Steel City, which was another track they used to hold nationals at, but that there was the final state championship of the year there. And I remember I'm on the starting line, and Donnie Snyder and Bob were there, and they were up checking results or something for that, because this is the final round. And I remember they come running down to the starting line then and said, hey, like, I don't know if them results got turned in or whatever. And they said, you don't need to win this race. You've already got it wrapped up. And my thoughts are, you know, okay, I might have it wrapped up, but I don't want to take the championship by not winning this final race, just kind of to make a statement. And so anyway, I forget what happens. I forget if I crashed in the start or get a bad start or something and started out back, but I had to work my way up through. It didn't take a whole lot of time till I did get up to second. But by now, whoever's got the lead got a big lead on me, and it just kept closing and closing, and it wasn't down till the very final lap that I did take the win and won that. So anyway, that was part of '82, the state championship as well. And somewhere in there, got another little story to go here. We go out and we're doing a race the track is called Sleepy Hollow. I think this here's out by Fredericksburg, far side of Harrisburg out there. And this may have been one of the state championships, so I don't really remember. We go out there and we're doing that. So it's me and Shirley, and I don't remember if Donnie Snyder, because he used to travel a lot with us, went along too, maybe Bob, not sure. So we go out there, Johnny Gallagher, his mom and dad. Johnny's pretty young yet. I don't think he even has his driver's license just yet. So we go out there, they're in another vehicle. We all go out there, and there's these little cabins where we could stay. They were right by the track. So we each rented our own little cabin thing, and we're staying there. And if you knew Johnny's dad, Leonard, he was a very mellow guy. I mean, very mellow. Never really changed expression in that. Very super nice guy, but very mellow in that. So his dad gets in their shower, and they have these paper mats there for when you get out of the shower. And for whatever reason, his dad sticks the mat in the shower, and it ends up plugging up the drain, and the water's flowing out over. And it was just kind of really funny knowing his dad and the way his dad is so mellow, and this happens to them out there. So kind of always remembered that story, and we'd talked about that different times. Now, I guess also in this year, me and Shirley go to High Point. And this was for a national amateur qualifier as well. And I'm going to do this in the B class, but it is a national amateur qualifier, and I believe at this time, this probably was the very first year ever for Loretta Lynn's. They were starting that there. It was Dave Coombs Sr., still alive at that time, and he was the promoter for Loretta Lynn starting up that series. So anyway, me and her load up. It's on a Saturday, go down to High Point, and by now her parents is letting her travel with me and stay in that. Which seems kind of crazy now, but times were a little different back then. I just couldn't imagine if you had a daughter that's, 15 years old, I'm 19 years old, and letting her leave and go on overnight trips where we're staying away and that. But little different times back then, but that's what we did. So me and her go down there to High Point, spend the night at the track. We're staying there. And don't really remember the results or anything. I don't even have them recorded, but I met up there with a guy, his name was Ray Somino. I called him Somo or Somino, which he was from, I believe, Gillette, New Jersey. There, and again, this was a national qualifier. That's why I was bringing in riders from other states in that as well. I just remember Ray was super fast. I didn't beat him. I'm pretty sure Ray won that day. Super fast kid. But anyway, Ray goes on and he holds, not sure what year it is, as a pro. He turns pro and he earns a national number of 15. Not sure what year that is, but that is my first meeting of Ray Somo. So got here, another story, kind of in racing. There was, let's just say there's a lot of injuries. Anybody that's done it for very long, you're going to have injuries, almost everybody, and sometimes pretty serious injuries. So we go to a race. This here's over at Yankee Lake. And my grandparents lived right next door to us. Had the practice track there on their property. It had been there, I had it there for quite a few years now in that. And my granddad he had paid for a bulldozer to come in and build the jumps and all that there on this practice track. But so they'd seen me ride a lot because it's basically right in their backyard. And but they had never been to a race. So this is the very first race they're going to come to. Kind of local, over by Brookfield, Ohio. So they show up there that day. My parents come, because it's my mother's parents really on her side. And we go to the starting line. They always stage the bikes on the starting line. Well, there's a race going on right ahead of you, you know, whatever class that may be, and they stage the next one. So as soon as that class finishes, they can start the next group to keep them going out of the day. So we're staged and we're on the starting line, waiting to go out. And the race ahead of us ends, but there was a wreck, and the ambulance hauls the kid off, and that takes him to the hospital. And this is quite common. Some days they would keep 2 ambulances at the track if it's a busy day where they're hauling kids out. But for whatever reason, there's only 1 ambulance there, and they load them up and they take them off to the ambulance. And we're sitting there waiting, because a lot of times they will dispatch the second ambulance out to the track. Well, that one's transitioning, hauling somebody to the hospital, if they don't already have a second one there. So we're sitting there on the line and we're waiting, and pretty soon they come down and they send everybody back. They clear the starting line and send us back to the pits. So we go back to the pits and we're waiting, and some time has passed, maybe a half hour or so. And so they come on and they make an announcement that the kid's name was Billy Watson, which I knew who he was, didn't really know him. But they come on and they make an announcement that Billy was pronounced dead. He didn't survive the crash. And he had actually crashed, got up, pushed the bike off to the side of the track before then he hit the ground and fell back over. But I believe he had broken his neck. But Billy didn't survive. And so they come over and they make the announcement, but they also state that it was his parents' wishes that their statement was that Billy lived and loved the sport of motocross, and that he would never want an event to be canceled because of him. So it was their wishes that the races continue and go on. They didn't want it canceled. So by now you can only imagine this announcement coming through. There's a lot of upset people. I mean, parents are crying. My grandmother is quite upset. She's saying, she don't want me to go back out. Don't do it. You don't have to do this and that. But I'm telling you, it'll be all right. You know, it'll be all right. At that time, you're young. You don't ever think, you know, that you're going to be the one. But even though you know you do get injured in that, it just doesn't really bother you so much then. So anyway, they send us back down to the starting line and line us up, and I end up winning that race. But that was the story of Billy Watson and how that went down, and the first and only race my grandparents ever went to was that day. And it just happened to be on the day that something like that had happened. because there were other tragic events in that happened, at other times, but just happened that was the first and only time they ever went. So we raced out that year, and again, Donnie Snyder was a very good friend of mine. He would kind of stayed at my parents' place in the garage area, and that we had kind of a sleeping area out there, and he would stay up there, and his parents were from Pittsburgh. They come up to the campground, but it was his stepfather. It wasn't his real father that had the camp up here and they would just leave on Sunday evenings. They would go back to Pittsburgh and leave. If Donnie wasn't there when they left and they'd go back to Pittsburgh and they'd lock the camper up. So he would stay there at our house for the whole week and that until they come back the following weekend, and sometimes he'd just stay again. But anyway, he was kind of like my mechanic. He loved working on the bikes and that, and by now he had been around there long enough. He knew a lot about the bikes and that. So that period of time, he pretty much did the wrenching on my bikes and that. He was kind of my mechanic. He'd wash them up. I could just ride, and that he would clean them, do the air filters, get the bike. He would have them all prepped for me. And that, really good friend. So Donnie signed up for the service, was going into the Navy, and he was going to be leaving then at the end of that year. So the final race of that year we went was at down by Pittsburgh track, Rocky Ridge, going back there. And so I won that day, took the first overall, and that's probably the only trophy I do not have. I took that trophy then and gave it to Donnie just as a thanks and a dedication for, all the help that he had done. Don't know if he still has it yet today. I haven't got to see Donnie in many, many years. After he joined the service, when he got off on leave, by then me and Shirley were married and had our place back here. So whenever he got off on leave, he would come stay with us here. But at that point in time, I was kind of done racing and that. But he would come and spend his leave time here with us, stay with us up here. And so that was kind of the story of that. But I haven't got to see Donnie in many years. Haven't seen him. I've talked to Bob Swartzmiller and hear that Donnie still does live down there by Pittsburgh somewhere. I always thought I'd like to look him up in that. But so that's the end of that, and that's kind of the end of the year of my dreams then of making it as a factory racer. And I know later in life here, I've been asked, and Shirley has asked me before and others, do you ever regret quitting racing? Now, when I say that, I didn't quit racing at this point, even though this is the end of my racing as far as A-class, dreams of making it as a pro and that. The rest of my years now is just coming back and basically doing it for fun. Because I do pick it back up a number of years later. But so anyway, get that question now and then. Do you ever regret quitting? And thinking back on it now, when I look back in that, I really have no regrets. Because when I look at it back and I see a lot of the guys that did make it, and picked up factory rides and that. Typically when that happens, you're at a young age yet, because motocross is not really a sport for the older per se at the pro level. So when you're picked up, at a young age or make it, as a pro, especially as a factory rider, there's a lot of pressure put on you. You're paid a lot of money, but along with that becomes a lot of pressure. And with that pressure, you push it above your limits and over your head. And most all of those guys, not all of them, there's been very few escape without multiple major injuries. So along with that comes serious injuries, and a lot of them. You can't push it to that level without having constant injuries. So I got to escape a lot of that. I mean, I've had a number of injuries and had some later than that. It's kind of serious injuries, but not at the level that most of those guys get pushed to, you know, at the pro ranks like that, because of the pressure in that. And also, along with that, a lot of money, and you're at a young age, you don't know how to handle the money. So there becomes a very wild lifestyle among a lot of them guys, almost like a rock star lifestyle. They're making a lot of money, at least back in the early days. That's kind of been curbed a lot later. But at that period of time, it was well known where those guys were trashing the rental cars and that. Just totally wild, reckless life, mishandling the money. And in the end, they end up broke. Even after making all the money they make, they end up broke. And I know that at that point in time in my life, I was fairly wild. I mean, as a teenager in that, I mean, in the off season, we did do a lot of partying and a lot of wild things in that. And I know now that I probably, had I made it into there at that point in time in my life, I would have fell right into that trap as most all the other guys. You're just young and inexperienced, and it's so easy to fall into that trap, you know, and most of them do. And their life is not that great later on. And now and largely because of Shirley. I mean, she kind of grounded me, put an end to a lot of my wild lifestyle and that, and grounded me so I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I'm older now and now got a fairly comfortable life, but a lot of that had come about because of Shirley. And I know that if I would have continued down that path, life today could be a lot worse for me, even though maybe I would have made it. I don't know. But that's why I have no regrets. I'm happy where I'm at. So I've always answered no. I have no regrets of that. Quitting at that point. And I got to come back later on anyway. And really at that time my thoughts were, because then I go on and race in 83, which I'll go over that here in another video and that. But only, you know, in the B class as an amateur and that. So I get to race then, and then even then when I quit to get married, I had always thought, you know, that my plans were someday I thought I could take some years off, get married, get settled in, and then come back and pick it up and maybe go back into the pro ranks and, you know, racing and that, join the A class and pick back up there. And that was kind of my thoughts a little bit, not realizing that time off the bike makes a huge difference. And also, once after the 83 year, you know, and then I kind of quit really racing, and we started a tree service and got so involved in that I just really didn't have the time to ever come back and do it, you know, for a number of years right then. So through starting the tree service, building a business there and all that, and getting married, things just really changed after that. But I will pick up another video which continues on then with my 83 year. And then there will be more down the road when I eventually do come back, but not, you know, until like 7 or 8 years later. And get to fulfill some of my dreams later of like going to Loretta Lynn's. You know, I'd never done that before, so that become one of my later goals in that, which I get to accomplish then. So even though this is the end of my dreams as a pro, it's really not the end of my dreams at racing and that. So we'll cover that a little later in some other videos. And I'm just going to take a quick glance back here before I stop this one. Just making sure here I kind of captured everything here in this here, and I believe that I did. So I will end this video here, which concludes the 1982 race season, and I'll pick up the next one for 1983.